Hello, John Michael Chambers here. Follow Intel and Insights now weekly every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern with Juan like you've never heard him before. Visit johnmichaelchambers.com and ampnews.us to view these broadcasts. And now a man who has been serving this nation since the time of Ronald Reagan. His clandestine assignments and self-imposed directives, many which are unknown to the public, play a critical role in protecting this nation and its interests for decades. A good friend and most valuable voice and resource for the new media. This week's episode is titled Prepare for What Lies Ahead. And now to provide some insights and some direction and caring thoughts about how we can all get through this together is our good friend. Please welcome back Mr. Juan. Hey, Juan.
Hey, John. Good to talk with you again.
Thank you for being here. Last week's episode, we discussed some of the pendulum shifting reveals. And folks, if you've missed that, you've got to go back and watch it. Really unbelievable information about what lies ahead potentially and how it may play out later this year. So tune into last week's episode if you've missed it. In today's episode, with all the dangers that are facing all of us in America and everyone in this world, in the weeks and months that lie ahead as these no election approaches, let's discuss ways, Juan, that we can prepare physically, mentally, financially, and spiritually to not only survive, but perhaps even thrive and come out the other and better people than we are today, and thus a better nation, and thus a better world for all of us to live in. Let's tackle that in the next 26 minutes. Before we get into this one, just a quick announcement, folks. You can go to johnmichaelchambers.com and be sure to check out Get Out of the System, a 5-bucket approach, which does not only address financial, it addresses other things. But let's weigh into that right now. And please, folks, visit thejennifermack.com for incredible gear, or mag, what do they call it these days? Swag? I'm in the old school. And of which President Trump has acknowledged, and you'll see some of that up on the site. One is very creative, jennifermack.com, books, films, and things you want to own. Have some fun in this moment of darkness that we're in. Anyway, Juan, please talk with us about how people can prepare physically, mentally, financially, and spiritually through what we're confronting, and more importantly, what lies ahead.
Well, let me start, maybe not quite exactly where you wanted to start, and then work my way to it. Why would we be in a situation where maybe we have to do something to get out of the way of anything? The reality is, you're a person living in occupied France, and the Allies are landing, and the Germans are having to begin to withdraw. And as they withdraw, you're in the battle space between them. It's one thing to be in an occupied territory. It's another thing to be in a area where you have combatants from both sides shooting through your house. You get in the basement and dig deeper, get out of the way. A wise man sees trouble and gets out of the way. The reality is, with the revelations that are coming and the revelations that are already here, we know that numerous organizations, several of them international in nature, have conspired and run money through the banking system to pay for and to orchestrate actions against America, inside America and at the periphery of America. Several weeks ago, I was briefed directly on the exact financial transactions that occurred, moving money from different countries in Europe through Germany and into organizations that were subverting the electoral process here in the United States, organizations that had payroll, if you will, to go and attack state by state certain actions. And in fact, a lot of these attacks were in fact, all of them ultimately, will be found to have been county by county across America. A lot of the counties that were voted red, voted for Trump, they voted much more strongly for Trump than what the numbers show, because there was manipulation to bring it close enough that it looked at least close there, so that other places where the vote was heavily manipulated looked more plausible. Um, uh, and so this manipulation was very intricate just to get enough numbers and still retain plausibility. One of the terms that's used is, for example, one of the papers that was written by a friend of mine and a friend of the country. He was talking about the margin of victory has to be greater than the margin of error or fraud, and so they would tweak these numbers. Now, those organizations that paid for that, those groups that are internationalist or globalist in nature, ultimately un-American, by the way, they were firing shots literally at the freedom of the American people. Within the mechanisms where they reside, where they have agents that do their bidding, the primary location beyond the political players are the business players and the banking community. And the manipulations in the way that money is transferred, what money is, how it's utilized, that is a realm where a lot of these privateers operate. And in order to exert control on the world, that's the puppet strings, these monetary, if you will, puppet strings. When those types of battles are happening, it's very dangerous to put your life energy into something that is denominated by them, whoever they may be at the time. The they being the people that decide what money is, decide whether you can use your money the way you want to. During this particular type of a moment, the safety is something more tangible, uh, that isn't a medium of exchange that is arbitrary. In other words, paper money or digital money. It's far more dangerous to have digital money that's dots and tittles on a computer screen than it is paper money, as wild as that sounds. Um, what what constitutes something of value? It can be land. Uh, is it land that does something, something that grows something? Banks don't loan money readily towards vacant land. They want something with a building on it. They want something that's working somehow, that can have a factory, a house, a residence that's doing some active function. Just raw land that is sitting fallow is a dangerous investment because it's not returning any type of return. They want something that's generating a return. It's the same thing as, for example, gold and silver. When you have gold or silver, they neither spin nor toil. They are a store of wealth, but they are not a generator of wealth. Normally, you can take either and apply it industrially and make it do something, but it's generally not held that way. In fact, that's part of the logic why we went to an oil-backed dollar from a gold-backed dollar. We didn't go from a gold-backed dollar to nothing. We went from a gold-backed dollar to an oil-backed dollar. The problem there was it was offshore oil predominantly in the Mideast, primarily Saudi and OPEC oil. And we guaranteed the safe passage of that oil as long as they denominated their transactions in dollars. And we exported our dollars to broaden the number of dollars out there in the world, and we could send our inflation overseas. That's why Trump says when he gets back, and he'll be back before, well, much sooner than you expect. He says, we will drill, baby, drill. Why? Because it will be domestic energy production, which drives jobs locally, and we're not exporting our wealth, whatever form it may be in, to people overseas. We will be doing it right here at home and putting our own people to work. We won't be enriching people that don't like us or do things that we don't agree with as a people. So when you say, well, how am I going to store my life energy? When you work every day and you put it into a medium like dollars or dots and tittles in a bank somewhere or a retirement account, that's your life energy. And you're storing it somewhere to access it later. And you're hoping that it's still worth what you valued it at when you put it in. Inflation destroys that worth. So they pay you interest, but you're just breaking even. So you invest it in the stock market to get a higher rate of return. But what happens if there's drama and those companies that it's stored in don't do well, or you pick the wrong sector? You invested in energy and you should have invested in electronics or real estate or mining or something like that. When things get highly questionable, one rule is if you don't have and hold it yourself, you don't actually have it. If it's in a safe deposit box on the other side of the planet or the country, it's not readily accessible to you, you don't have it. So you want to hold things as close as reasonably possible. And I know within this audience, most of the people I'm talking to, they're not mega gazillionaires. People with higher net worths, there's different questions about how you hold it properly and effectually. But for this audience, most of it is, do you want to have stuff that's, has better utility to you in a crisis? And then part of that question is, and for how long? Now, with what's going to happen here in America and has already begun, you have to make a decision, and it's God informed, okay? Divinely informed is the only way I can say it. Is this the end of America and you're trying to store wealth to go somewhere else to restart? Or is this a pause? Is this a hiccup? And you're trying to store wealth, your life energy, for a period of time so that you can re-engage when things start back up again. And how long is that pause for? Do you need it in gold and silver that you can't eat, or do you need it in a food supply? Do you want it in some type of land or business investment that could come back, and will it be in your area? Are you in an area that's probably going to be damaged severely and won't come back to functionality anytime soon? Or are you, have something that's halfway mobile? Would the comparison be a fixed restaurant location versus a food truck that can go wherever the people end up and you can get supplies to? Most of those decisions are not something I intend to answer today. You can have private conversations with counselors, and in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. That's the scripture. But the reality is, there's so many unknowns that each person needs to take time, ask for divine guidance for their situation. The answer for a young mother is probably completely different for grandma who's retired, maybe has a house that's already paid off or has some type of fixed income and is counting on the government. Each person has different considerations. What are we trying to get through? It is my belief that we're really trying to get through several weeks of a really hard stop, kind of pushing the reset button on the VCR and then restart it. And a year or more of pretty intense trauma where things don't work as smoothly as they normally do. And there may be some supply issues while we get things sorted back out again. Is it Armageddon? Is it the end of the world? Not in your life. Okay. America's a big country. And even with all the dramas, everything happening, this is not the end of America, please God. So you need to just be able to function and have some reserves and something that people readily accept as money. Personally, just junk a silver coin, pre-64, pre-1964, quarters, nickels, dollars, half dollars, whatever, that's real silver. And it is recognized as legal tender. And it's already been stamped. It's recognizable by people. It has a known certain value. Gold bars, silver bars, people can fake that a lot more readily. And how long are you trying to get by for? What are you going to buy? You buying a house? You're just going to trade for potatoes with the neighbor down the street? Maybe you don't want to trade silver for potatoes. Maybe you've got dried milk. Maybe you've got other things that have value in that kind of environment. Fear drives people. Some people want bullets and some people want butter. Do you need that if you already have it? Am I going to have a bunch of gold bars, or I just have, a month's supply of what I need to get by? You don't have to have freeze-dried 5-star luxury foods. You can have some staples, get by, a little medicine if you have some need for it that's unique to you or to a loved one. A lot of people in this audience have children or relatives who are not going to be able to defend or protect themselves. They're not in a position for any number of reasons, including just their physical capabilities, because they've been damaged by something. And it's up to us, those that are able to function, before God, as God gives us grace, to kind of recognize that and take appropriate action to try and be there and be a channel of blessing for those that are not as well-to-do or capable as we are. And that's part of the advantage of a moment like this. This is when we find out who the true Americans are. This is when we find out who the people that are actually in tune with and in accordance with divine directives. There'll be a lot of people complaining and hand wringing and waving their arms in the street, and they didn't look to see, hey, is something need to be done? How do I jump in there and get it done? The difference between an employee and a manager: an employee does everything he's told to do. A manager looks to see what hasn't been done and needs done and finds a way to get it done with what they have. Americans, our business is business. So be about the business, but whose business? Hey, it's the business of God. We're a godly nation. And to the extent that you're not in that function, you've missed what the calling of America is. So getting in line with what God intended for us, those promises that go all the way back to the Pilgrims, that godly perspective is not wrong. And if you don't see it that way, that's fine. Go listen to somebody else. I'm talking to an audience that I believe understands what classic America was about. Somewhere in your community, somewhere in your parentage, somewhere in what you learned just being a human and knowing that there's a divine creator, you've been prepared, and you know that you have some kind of a responsibility. To him whom much is given, much will be expected. You're an American. You were given so much just with your birthright in this land that you must act and think and operate accordingly. And that means picking up your shovel, picking up your gear, picking up your boots, and getting whatever needs to be done to get this country back on track. And that includes bringing as many along as possible. If you have the ability to put a little bit more aside, put it aside. It won't go to waste. And it's not forever. This isn't the end of America. Operate accordingly. We've got a bridge moment. We got to pull it together, get through that while we clear out some of this hubris at the federal level. States are the most critical thing in this. It's all about states' rights, states learning to operate together. You're going to see that in the way that the Guard is deployed and the military is deployed and what comes. And then once we bridge through, we restabilize because of people like the people in this audience specifically. I know what kind of people are in this audience, John, and it's because they're paying a little closer attention. They're thinking their way through this. It's the reason they even take the time to listen to a broadcast like this. All I need you to do is ask for divine guidance. I don't know exactly what your role is. I just know you have a role. And if you ask God, God is as willing as you are for you to get to the right answer. If you're sincere, he's sincere. You cannot be more sincere than God himself. If you ask a sincere question, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to make this happen? He will give you answers for what he intends to use you to do. He's not going to ask you to do something that's outside of what his will for you is. And what he wants you to do, don't look over your shoulder. What about him? Well, why isn't he? Well, I thought he should. You know what? You cover your base, let God work out the details with the other ones. What's he want you to do? Find it out, get it done. When God tells you to do something, you don't start quibbling. You get it done. And that's the moment that we're in. And if you do that, you will also receive a blessing, because as you're pouring your cup out to bless others, God will be refilling it. And you won't be drinking stale water or stale wine. You'll be drinking the fresh stuff because you're in the flow, in the will of your Creator, who intends to see this country not just survive, but thrive, so that we can go stop the evil and the chaos that the devil himself and everybody in his service intend, not just for America, but for the world. We will get America back on track, and then we will stand up and be the man God created us to be, the women that God raised us up to be, the parents that do things and help their children to create a beautiful future for themselves and their offsprings and generations we haven't even imagined yet. And once we are in the process of doing that, to then turn, not to go out to rule over the rest of the world, not to be the new dictators of the world, not to be our brothers and sisters' keepers, enslaving them, as people have tried to do in the name of the American government and people. We will go out and be our brother's brother, our brother's sister, our sister's sister. We will go out and assist the rest of the world in throwing the tyrants in the slammer, to stop them where they are and to take back the world and go the beautiful places that God intended humanity to go, to doing the beautiful things God intended humanity to do, to be the creation that God takes pleasure in, because we build and do beautiful things.
Wow, solid truths, suggestions and direction, and mostly inspiration from our good friend Juan '07. Thank you, Juan. I've been taking a lot of notes here in bullet point form. I'm gonna put all this in the footnotes and the various platforms that we will distribute this program on to help those succinctly go back and listen and find those points in there. There's a lot here, folks. We're talking about God, the God energy, God in us, God the creator, of which we are all a part of, life's energy, how to store, direct, the proper usage of that energy and bringing it into the earthly terms of how are we going to direct that energy in various different ways, depending on who we are, where we are, what our circumstances are, but everyone needs to heed the call and prepare physically, spiritually, mentally, and financially. A quick comment I have before your closing comments, Juan, on the, in essence, folks, as I took some notes here, we're talking about having some cash set aside for disturbances. Juan talked about really potentially several weeks of a real hard period. So we need to be prepared for that, and perhaps a prolonged period of a year or so, where various different levels of disruptions to things that we would need to have stability in our lives. So we want to prepare for that, folks. Have some cash at home. Get into silver and gold, namely silver. Juan spoke about quarters and nickels pre-64, where they were minted with 90% pure silver. It's recognizable, and it will get you a lot of barter if we get to that circumstance. Also, just as a hedge against inflation, for those that have a little more to go around and so forth, you'll liquidate it out later and have the value that will mean something. Number three, invest
Well, and let
in
me just add this one thing, John. I said quarters, nickels. I should have said dimes, because the nickels didn't have the silver. But there's some people out there,
thank you.
wringing their hands. Oh my gosh! But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right, so thank you for that correction. That's called junk silver in the gold and silver world. So you'll need to investigate that. The next thing is, owning land, but land that perhaps can produce, whether it's food or you're putting a building on it, investing in businesses, patriot businesses, I would add, that align with your morals and goals and values for yourself and society, rather than just throwing
Well,
some
and
money
let
in the
me
stock.
dive in for 1 second, John. I apologize for interrupting, but I should have said it a second ago. If you have a trade, the tools of your trade, if you have
Mhm.
things that you do, sometimes the best investment is yourself and the things that you can do, or the supplies that you would work with that might not be readily available all the time. If you need, fuel for your tractor, and you think there might be some disruption or prices that going crazy, maybe it's fuel, maybe it's a few extra spare parts, so that if there's any disruption in the parts supply chain, you got those spares available to you, or an extra piece of equipment. Not so much even if you needed it, but it's a store of wealth that has value on the far side of the disruption, that still is a tangible, as opposed to dots and tittles on a computer screen, or even the paper currency that might go south. Something more tangible that is, you can put your hands on, keep it close to home. And for some people, it may just be the basics: food, and a few things, so that you don't have to go buy something, and some cash. I mean,
Sure, no problem, and thank you for the clarification. Yeah, food, water, medications that you may be needing, things you need. Get these things at home and surround yourself with like-minded people who truly understand the times in which we live, and expand those circles. Have plan Bs with those folks. whether they be geographical shifts or getting together to support one another. Someone can stitch a wound where someone else can read a book and sing a song and lift the spirit at night. I want to thank you, Juan, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.